So today we're going to talk about a kind of sickness. It's one that infects people in power. And what's wild is that the diagnosis for it is over 1,500 years old. But the symptoms? Well, they're going to feel eerily familiar. We're talking about the psychological flaw that can turn a good leader into an absolute tyrant.
I mean, you've probably seen this before, right? A leader who starts out seeming pretty reasonable, but over time, they just become arrogant, totally out of touch, and impossible to question. It's like they're living in their own world, completely blind to their own faults. It's such a common story, but believe me, it is not a new one.
You know, the most insightful analysis of this whole problem comes from a really unexpected source, Pope Gregory the Great. He was leading Rome through what was basically apocalyptic turmoil back in the late 6th century. We're talking invasion, disease, total collapse, and in the middle of all that chaos, he saw exactly how power corrupts the mind, and he wrote the definitive manual on how to stop it.
So what is it? What is this psychological mechanism that makes a leader lose their mind? Well, Gregory, who is actually building on the work of an earlier thinker, he diagnosed the process with incredible clarity.
And what's so fascinating is that Gregory wasn't just working in a vacuum. About a century before him, a rhetorician named Pomerius had identified the exact same danger. You could say Pomerius was the theorist who first warned about the sin of pride, and Gregory was the practitioner, the guy on the ground who turned that warning into a concrete, actionable guide for leaders.
Both of these guys used this really powerful metaphor to describe what happens to a leader's mind. They called it a swelling. Pomerius called it inflation, which you can hear inflation in, while Gregory used the word tumor. So you see, they saw pride not just as some moral failing, but as a dangerous psychological condition that literally grows and distorts a leader's perception of reality.
In the process, it unfolds in 5 almost predictable steps. First, a leader is given power. Then comes the praise, right? Subordinates rush to do what they're told. This leads to the most dangerous stage of all, isolation. Suddenly, honest feedback just vanishes. And inside this echo chamber, the leader's mind begins to swell with pride, until finally, they become completely blind to their own faults. They actually start believing their own hype.
And look, this isn't just about one person's ego. The consequences, as Gregory warned, are catastrophic. A leader's fall doesn't just happen in a vacuum. They drag the entire organization, the entire community down into the abyss with them.
So, if pride is the disease, then what's the cure? Well, Gregory didn't just diagnose the problem. He actually developed a powerful antidote, and he outlined it in his masterwork, the Pastoral Rule.
Yep, his solution was a book, the Pastoral Rule. It was designed to be a practical, hands-on manual for anyone, really, in a position of authority. It teaches them how to wield power without being destroyed by it. And this was no obscure text either. The Pastoral Rule became one of the most influential books in Western history. It served as the definitive leadership guide for over 1,000 years. Its wisdom was considered so essential that even secular rulers, like King Alfred the Great in England, used it as a manual for how to be a good king.
Gregory's framework is just incredibly structured. The whole book is built on 4 pillars. First, who should even be allowed to lead in the first place? Second, what kind of life must they live to stay grounded? Third, how can they communicate effectively and actually adapt to their audience? And fourth, and this is the big one, how do they constantly practice self-examination to fight off that ever-present danger of pride?
At the very core of Gregory's antidote is one single quality: humility. But for him, this was not about being meek or being a pushover. No way. It was an active, essential survival tool. As one scholar put it, humility is the quality without which those in power will not be able to survive. It's the only real defense against that swelling of pride.
Okay, so why does a 1,500-year-old leadership manual still matter so much today? Well, it's because the psychology of power, it hasn't changed, not one bit.
I mean, just think about it. A politician surrounded only by advisors who tell them exactly what they want to hear. A CEO in a boardroom who has absolutely no idea what life is like for their frontline workers. Heck, even a social media star trapped in a bubble of endless praise and affirmation. These are all just modern versions of the exact same isolation and pride swelling that Gregory warned us about.
But this ancient wisdom really reveals is the ultimate truth about power. Its greatest danger isn't necessarily evil or malice. It's the isolation that breeds delusion. The sickness begins when leaders are so surrounded by praise that they lose contact with reality, and they become blind to the world and, ultimately, to themselves.
So this leaves us with a really critical question. Gregory prescribed humility as a personal survival tool for leaders. But how do we, as employees, as citizens, as followers, how do we build systems that actually demand that humility? How do we make sure our leaders are forced to listen, to face criticism, and to remember that they are supposed to serve the flock, not the other way around?